let me just, okay. Can you guys see my screen right now?
Yes, I
Okay.
can.
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, sweet. All right. So hello everyone. Thank you all for joining us tonight. And thank you to the APHS board, Inga and team for coordinating this talk and giving us the opportunity to share our experiences navigating med school apps. Alec and I are both really passionate about helping pre-meds achieve their goals, especially those who are, like first gen medical students, especially those within our Armenian community. So, just a little bit about me. My name is Chris. I'm Alec's twin brother. We are OC natives, born and raised in Irvine, California. I was a former UCI undergrad pre-med, just like many, if not all of you on this call. I majored in biosci, minored in medical anthropology. Upon graduating, I ended up taking two gap years, one for MCAT extracurriculars and one for the application cycle. We'll talk a little bit more about that as we go on. And then I was accepted into UCI med school, where I'm now currently a fourth year med student. I am hoping to match into internal medicine residency with plans to be a hospitalist, but I'm keeping an open mind in terms of like if I want to pursue any other subspecialties. And then in my free time, I enjoy hiking, painting, and drawing.
Hey everyone, I'm Alec. I'm a fourth year medical student and MPH candidate at Touro University, Nevada. For undergrad, I also spent I graduated from UCI, but spent my first 2 years at UCR and transferred. Uh, I majored in biological sciences and also minored in medical anthropology. Graduated magna cum laude and inducted into Phi Beta Kappa. After graduating, I ended up taking 3 gap years. Was initially planning on taking two. I'll get into that later in the presentation. I applied to medical school twice, successfully matriculated into Touro, Nevada, in Las Vegas, just outside of about 20 minutes outside of Las Vegas. And I'm also currently in the process of applying for residency. I also applied in internal medicine with plans for pursuing fellowship later in gastroenterology.
Okay. So just for like the objectives and like topics we're going to talk about, we'll spend the next 45 minutes or so going over our slides, covering a wide range of topics, like from exams to apps to gap years and beyond. We'll then spend the last quarter of the hour doing like a quick Q&A, answering questions that were pre-submitted as well as any like live questions that any of y'all have. Which reminds me, if any of you guys have like any questions that come up, feel free to use the chat. Al, can you monitor it for me since okay. Um, yeah, and then before we dive in, I just want to acknowledge that this presentation can induce a fair amount of stress and anxiety, but I say this because I wasn't there too long ago. I remember how anxious I would feel leading these types of talks, but please know that our goal isn't to invoke fear or anxiety. We just want to set you all up for success and give you the information that we wish we had prior to applying. Um, and I hope it gives you guys the opportunity to reflect on your own like portfolios and resumes so that you guys can fill in the gaps and identify weaknesses and kind of build a really strong competitive application. Also know that developing an application takes like years. It's like a long marathon. It's not a sprint. So it's important to take a macroscopic view of the whole process, but please take everything one day at a time and it makes it a little bit more digestible. Okay. So we're going to start off with something a little bit heavier. I know exams and GPAs. The reality is numbers for med school admissions kind of matter. It's clearly not the only thing that med schools look at, but I'd say it's a pretty vital component. It's kind of like you should definitely have good scores and good GPAs, and then they'll start looking at everything else. So let's get into it. Okay, so there's several entrance exams to take. Obviously, the big one is MCAT. It's a 7.5 hour long exam. There's four sections. There's like a chem physics section, CARS, which is like critical analysis and reasoning skills, bio and biochem, and then psych social. Most questions on the MCAT are passage based, which I kind of didn't know about until like as I like, started studying for it. But basically, like you read a passage, and then there's a couple of questions that pertain to it. There are a few standalone discrete type questions on the exam, especially I think it's only for chem, bio, and psych. Cards is completely passage based. And then I listed some like common resources that people tend to like. Alec and I, we both used Kaplan, right, Alec?
Yeah, Kaplan
Kaplan
and Khan Academy for me.
and Khan Academy, yeah. And there's a lot of like great free resources on YouTube as well. Just like if you have a particular topic that's like no textbook or any like online resources really doing the job for you, just hop over to like YouTube and try to look up a good video. Um, let's see. And then I also really want to emphasize that the MCAT is like a really difficult exam that requires serious dedicated study time. This isn't a standardized test that you can kind of just rely on your undergraduate studies to kind of cover the topics. You really want to dedicate time to just studying for it. And then you also want to take the exam just once. Don't take the exam if you're not ready. And I know that's kind of a scary thing, but you want to walk into test day feeling like you're at your very best. You're not going to have any regrets what score you get. You're just putting your best foot forward. Um, Alec and I also have a friend who actually took it twice. The second time they took it, their score went down and it kind of hurt their whole application and it kind of didn't look good for med schools. And they kept asking her about it and she ended up getting to med school, but it's just, I just want to let you guys know that it's not a good look per se. And then there's also three other tests that I didn't really know about until I was going through the process and stumbling across it. But there's one called Casper. It's an hour and a half long, like situational judgment type test. There's like video responses, so I guess it's like you record a response. I don't remember doing that. I like do you? It was more for us, it was just typing a response. But
Yeah, I was mostly
now
just
they
typing for
kind
us.
yeah, so now it's like they like give you a weird situation or like a ethical dilemma, and then you kind of need to respond to it and explain your thinking through it. The other one is called Duet. I'm not too familiar with this one, but it's out there. Look into it. And then there's a really new exam that just came out, I think a couple years ago. It's called Preview. Um, I think like only 8 schools require it now, but I think every year it's becoming more and more. This one is like an official AAMC type of exam, so yeah, no, keep that in mind as you're planning the application cycle and keep like enough time for prepping for it and taking it. Yeah, so we kind of touched on these topics like please take it once, only take it when you're confident, and be sure to study for it hard. So in addition to a good MCAT score, having an impressive GPA is also key to a competitive application, especially in the setting of having multiple extracurricular activities. It demonstrates your ability to effectively manage your time and fulfill multiple concurrent duties. When filling out the AMCAS application, which is like for ND programs, you will be asked to manually enter your entire transcript, and then AMCAS will spit out a science and a non-science GPA. I bring this up because you really want to do well in your science classes because you're gonna have two separate scores. So like you're getting like stacking up your schedule with a bunch of like GEs and art classes that will like bump up your GPA. It will bump up your total GPA, but your science one will still kind of like be there. So just try your best getting good scores. And then again, if you slip up one quarter, don't make the best grade. It's not the end of the world. Especially if it's earlier in your college career, because most programs like a positive like trend in your grades as you advance through your years. So don't feel defeated. It's not over until it's over. Fight on, learn from your mistakes, grow from it. And then I would also say just like really like take a moment and like reflect on like what went wrong. Change your study habits, surround yourself with a little bit more like goal-oriented people, at least for a little while, so you can kind of develop good habits. And then while we're on the topic of classes, I have several points to make. When you're signing up for classes, please like look around and determine which courses are like fair with grading and they're not like impossibly hard. You don't want to jeopardize your GPA for a class that's like not even fair. I don't know if do you guys like know Dr. Kadandale from UCI? Okay, he's like a biochem professor from like year two, and he has like negative points back when I was a student, which was whack. So like try to avoid classes like that. In terms of like upper division courses, try to choose like easier classes. Again, you want to really like boost your GPA. Don't like, yeah. Anyways, enough on that. And then also some classes are tough regardless of who you choose as a. I think the chat is like going ham. Um, I don't know. I can't see my chat, but anyways, some courses are like tough regardless of who you take. So I would kind of choose like the better teacher. Like OChem in particular comes to mind. I think like Dr. King is like a really good teacher, but she's also hard. I don't know, she, I think it's a she. Um, but anyways, um, let's see. And then also real quick, certain schools have prereqs. So if your major isn't like your classic STEM pre-med major, talk to an advisor, figure out which classes you need to take. There's also the opportunity to like do a post-bac to fill in your gaps after the fact, after graduating, I mean. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So another thing. So I would say never sacrifice your coursework and academic performance in order to excel in your extracurriculars. You really, really, really like that's like you really want to get a good GPA and like do as best as you can on your courses. We already talked about GEs, but kind of one point I wanted to make was for those who are kind of entering UCI earlier in their years, try to like choose GEs that will work towards achieving a minor. You're kind of like doing two things at once. You're filling your GE requirements, but you're also going to have like a cool minor to tack onto your degree. And then for science GPA boosters, this is like mainly focused for UCI students. And again, I don't know if most people on this call are UCI students, but I would really recommend signing up to be a biosci peer tutor. It's like a course that you can take. I think it's 2 units, biosci 192. Um, a little bit of work goes into it. You have to like host office hours, you have to create worksheets, you have to host those like midterm review sessions, but it's like an guaranteed A in a science course. It's not like a class per se, but it's like you get science units and that's all that matters. And it's like a guaranteed A. So keep that in mind. I did it. Did you do it? I don't remember.
Yeah, I did do it. I did it for two
Okay.
quarters.
Yeah, I did it for 2 quarters as well. And then the other one is like research. So Bio 199, I really recommend you all do research. We'll get into it a little bit later, but this is also another like science units with a grade. Okay. And it's like units, it's like 1 through 5. So just reach out to a PI, try to get into a lab. And then every year it's almost like a guaranteed A because like a PI isn't going to give you like a B. That's weird. I haven't seen that happen. And then the last point I want to make is I would recommend taking summer school classes. That's what Alec and I did almost every single summer. And we did it to lighten up the course load during this academic school year so that we can kind of do our extracurriculars and put a little bit more energy in ensuring that we get good grades in the classes that we're taking during the year. Okay. So I just wanted to point out AMCAS is for MD programs, okay? The average MCAT score for applicants, so these are people who like not weren't necessarily accepted, just people who applied, was a 506. And then the average total GPA was 3.64. And then the science GPA was like a 3.54. For those who were accepted and matriculated in med school, the average MCAT score was 511, and the average total GPA was 3.77. And for like science, it wasn't too far off. It was 3.71.
All right, so Chris did a pretty excellent job of highlighting the importance of scores and GPA and how to set yourself up for success in this regard. So I really won't add much to that, but I'll highlight the average matriculant score for the DO program. So ACOMAS is the application portal for DO programs. I don't know if I did say I'm a DO student and Chris is an MD student. So the average GPA is just a bit lower for DO schools at about 3.67. We can go to the next slide. And the average MCAT for all DO schools is also lower at about 505 for matriculants. It should be noted that score averages vary from program to program, and the distribution of MCAT scores for DO students, just anecdotally, is very broad. Just in my circle of close friends at Toro, Nevada, our MCAT scores range between 504 and 517. So I wouldn't necessarily be hung up on a score. Try to do it as best as you can. Uh, but based on an assessment of statistical averages, if your scores tend to be on the bit lower of the end than the AMCAS averages that you see on MSAR, a DO program may be a valid point of entry for you.
Okay, so now we're going to talk about these different portals. So AMCAS is for MDs, AA commas, or I don't know how you pronounce it. That's for DOs. And then there's actually a separate portal for Texas schools. I didn't know this until it was way too late, so I just didn't apply to any Texas schools. But keep that in mind if you really want to go to Texas or have any special connections to Texas. So here are the components for the MD program application. Obviously, your academic record, coursework, GPA, MCAT score, and then work and activity. So this is kind of like your resume. So we're going to kind of focus the next few slides on this particular part. And then your essays, letters of rec, um, selection of med schools that you want to apply to. Okay, so here's the general application cycle timeline. I want to first draw your attention to how long the process is. It takes like almost a year. So let's break it down. So the MCAT should be taken kind of like well before you start submitting or working on your application. The application portal opens on May 1st. Starting May 28th, students can start submitting their completed applications. And completed means that you filled out all like the activities, and that MCAS has received an official copy of your transcript. You don't need to have all your letters of rec, MCAT scores, or like finalized list of programs that you're applying to done quite yet, but just ensure that you have your transcript sent in and you have it done. Once you submit your application, it's locked in and MCAS will then verify it. This can take 2 to 2-ish weeks, especially for those who apply it like day one. But I've heard that during peak season, it can take like up to like 6-ish weeks. During this verification process, the MCAS will kind of do a line by line comparison of like the courses that you did, as well as your transcript, sorry, the courses that you entered in the portal, as well as your transcript. So what I would recommend is mail like an official copy of your transcript to your house, open it up, and then just use that as like as you're entering and everything, and ensure that you're not like making any discrepancies. And then starting June 28th, MCAS will then send all verified applications to schools. Try your best to be in that first wave, but it's not the end of the world if your app isn't verified by June 28th. That's just the goal that you should shoot for. After you submit, take a breather, grab ice cream, get boba, whatever, and then kind of like come back in and lock in because like secondary applications will come pretty quick. And it comes like a tidal wave all at once. We'll talk about it in a little bit, but like I would say secondary season, kind of like this time, is probably the busiest part of the whole application cycle because just like the sheer volume, it's basically like every single school that you apply to has its own separate application with a lot of them kind of have similar questions. And again, we'll talk about this later. I should probably go a little bit faster, but um, so you can like reuse essays here and there, just but keep in mind it's going to be a lot of work during this time. And then interviews, hopefully you get a lot, and then you interview. Most of them are virtual, I think, but some may be in person. And then decisions, and then you start med school like in August, around August. Okay, so this is for people who are planning to have 0 gap years. That means like you should take your MCAT sometime during your junior year. You apply around that summer before your 4th year of undergrad. And then like during your senior year of college, you would be like going through this whole process. For those who like plan to do like 1 gap year, that means you should probably take your MCAT like during your senior year, apply as soon as you graduate, and then that gap year will be the application cycle. For people like me, it would be like a 2-year gap situation, 2 gap year situation where I wanted to graduate and then during that first year, study for the MCAT, apply that following summer, and then another year for the application cycle. Um, Admissions are always rolling, so you always want to be ahead of deadlines. And then, yeah, we kind of already talked about that. Okay, for AMCAS, there's 15 spots where you can enter activities. You want to really fill in all of these spots. So I would, and there's different components to it. So you want to talk about, you list like the experience type, which I'll get into in the next slide, organization name, point of contact, hours, as well as like which you need to differentiate whether it was completed slash like which ones you plan to do in the future, and then a 700 character description. And then for 3 activities, you have to like mark them as most meaningful, which gives you, I think, like 1,300 more characters to kind of elaborate a little bit more about it and why it was meaningful to you and why it makes you a good applicant and a good, like pre-med student. Um, yeah. So these are kind of like just the core competencies. These are kind of like the buzzwords that you should kind of use as you're kind of drafting your little description. Things like, oh, I was really compassionate, when I did this activity, or like this activity. Yeah, just use these buzzwords as you can because it's kind of like what they're looking for. In terms of experience types, here they are. These are the ones that I would highly, highly recommend. Like they're kind of like musts in my book. I mean, maybe not research, but why not? Especially if you go to UCI, it's such a research heavy institution. And there's a lot of opportunities. So I think like I don't know. I mean, I've known of some people who actually went to UCLA even, which has also a lot of research opportunities, but he had no research experience prior to med school. But this is just like what you should shoot for, okay? Um, Another thing is that you want to do clinical volunteering as well as non-clinical volunteering. I didn't know about this one right here. So that summer I was applying, Alec and I just signed up for a bunch of like food bank shifts and we just like we got like 100 hours in like like 1 month. We went ham. Leadership, that one's pretty broad, can be applied to a lot of things, but you know, I think that's like, pretty cool to have. I also want to say that like a lot of schools kind of like customer service, I've noticed. Alec, do you agree with that?
Yeah,
Like
absolutely.
customer service.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
kind of feeds into the service aspect of your application.
Yeah. So like don't think that like if you were a barista that's not like pre-med, like people like that stuff. So keep that in mind. And then you also definitely want to do shadowing and clinical observer, like observation. Okay, so here are the experience types. Here are some examples, like pretty much like pulled from my own resume. For shadowing, you want to reach out to doctors directly. I don't know if this is still a thing, but the Irvine Clinical Experience Program, it's basically like it's student organized, but it's 100 hours of shadowing spread across 3 quarters. And Alec and I at one point were like the president of this organization at some point, and like, but basically what's cool about it is that you get to rotate different specialties as a pre-med. I would also recommend volunteering at the UCI Med Center. I don't know if it's like competitive or not, but Alec and I both got in at some point, so look into it. It's pretty far. Like the commute is kind of far, but it's worth it. I would also say that there's like a new Irvine campus that's opening pretty soon in like 2025, so keep an eye out for that. I think they are going to have a volunteer service there, and it's like closer to the main campus for UCI. Medics in Armenia, Cope Health Scholars, which is like the health, I mean the Hogue, I think. It's like a Hogue system thing. And then non-clinical volunteering. So Alec and I did food bank, volunteer at church events, beach cleanups. Just think of anything that's like non-clinical. Leadership, student orgs. I know Inga just talked about how like she's transitioning over to like, or like at the end of the year, they'll like transition it, their positions to like younger students. So definitely keep that in mind. It's a great way to have another activity to mention in your application. Research, Bio 199. Also Europe. Alec and I did that for 2 years. You get a grant, you get to present your poster at the symposium. It's a pretty sweet deal. Scribing EMT is not a must, but it's highly prized. So don't worry about it. Alec and I didn't do that. Trying to think. Yeah, biosite peer tutoring I already talked about. Even if you don't do like get into the ICE program, just be brave and reach out to doctors. Like at worst, they won't respond to you. Just shoot your shot. It's not a big deal. They're just human. I remember that was like my biggest fear. I was very, very, very shy during my undergraduate years, but I had friends that kind of pushed me along the way and encouraged me to be brave. So surround yourself with those types of people. Um, yeah.
All right, so now we'll be covering the ACOMAS portal, which is the application portal for the DO programs. It's pretty similar to AMCAS in many ways, but with some notable differences. So we'll hash those out just now. So if you're wondering if there is anything different from this timeline relative to AMCAS, it's essentially exactly the same. At this point, I want to drive home the fact that your preparations into applying for these MD programs will be overlapping significantly with your preparations for applying for DO schools if you choose to dual apply, which I highly recommend. First and foremost, taking your MCAT, take your MCAT well before your app scores are released, 30 to 35 days before after you take your exam. So take it well before the verification period or before your submission period. As with your AMCAS application, some DO programs also expect the Casper and Duet exams, though the other AMC version of this is specifically for DO programs. But taking the Casper and Duet exams will cover the programs that require for the ACOMAS as well. The ACOMAS portal opens in early May. However, unlike AMCAS, you are free to submit the application as soon as the application opens. Upon submission, ACOMAS will begin to verify your application, which takes about 10 to 12 days. Mine took less than a week, so it really does vary. 10 to 12 days tends to be a max. And by early to mid-June, ACOMAS starts sending verified applications to schools. Remember that this application cycle is rolling, so be sure to get your primary app submitted as soon as possible, closer to the beginning of the time when the application portal opens. And a lot of the work that you'll be doing for the ACOMAS will overlap for the work you'll be doing for AMCAS. So the work you're spending on this portal won't necessarily be wasted or won't be applicable on things that you would be doing for AMCAS as well. And remember, like AMCAS, your preparation time will vary based on how many gap years you're taking. yeah, so we have these animations here as far as the gap year preparations go. And these are just the dates for this application cycle. It does vary from time to time, but this year the application cycle did open at in May 6th, whereas for ANCAS it opens towards the end of May, beginning of June. Next. All right. So, unlike the experiences section for ACOMAS is pretty similar to AMCAS, but the biggest difference here is that there's no limit for the number of entries that you can add. And while you do have no limit, I would try to limit this between 15 and 20 because while you may have so many things going on for ourselves, and we've all been there, we're all pretty high achieving people. I would try to focus on some of the high impact experiences you have because if you add something that's not necessarily impactful, it might end up diluting the rest of your application. So try to look for the 15 to 20 strong experiences that you can add. Otherwise, everything is pretty similar as far as the way your hours are calculated. It's a little bit more unique with ACOMAS. Instead of entering the hours that you've done total or the hours that you're anticipating doing, you end up putting the number of hours you complete weekly and then adding the number of weeks that you participated, and it automatically calculates. But besides that, it's pretty similar. The key description and responsibilities is about the same. And the only other difference is that there's no most meaningful section for your experiences. And here are the experience types that you have for ACOMAS. It's not nearly as uh, plentiful as the ones on AMCAS, but I would use these as a way to guide your experiences as far as trying to fill in any gaps. So because there are only six here, I would try to fill in at least five of these six experiences and just use this as a way to guide your application to see if there's anything else that you can add to make yourself a more well-rounded candidate. And also, I'm kind of like zooming through these, but we'll be sharing the slides with Inga, and I'm sure she'll share it with you guys as well. All right, so these are the examples of the things that I included. Like I said, like Chris was saying, collaborate with one another. Try to get your friends working with you guys with each other to get these experiences rolling in. As far as clinical shadowing goes, it's also something that's highly recommended for DO programs as well. For my school, it was actually a requirement. There is the actually, am I going to talk about this in the next slide? I am actually. So let's go to the next slide. So, as far as DO shadowing experiences go, there's kind of a conversation as far as whether it's a requirement for DO programs. Most DO programs do not require shadowing a DO physician. Shadowing an MD physician will be more than enough. The lines as far as practice of a DO and MD physician are very blurred and, in fact, most of the time non-existent. So, what these schools are trying to look for is you trying to showcase that you've entered the medical field at all. So, having a DO shadowing experience may help you because some schools try to market as far as providing some sort of different education experience, but an MD shadowing experience will not hurt you. And this is another difference as far as the application goes. On AMCAS, you have a option to include honors, presentations, and scholarships in your experiences section, but this is a completely different section on ACOMAS. So you can include all these things separately into your application without necessarily taking up space elsewhere.
Okay, I know we flew through that, but again, we'll provide these slides. Personal statement for the next section. You obviously want to answer why medicine. What do you hope to achieve with a medical degree? And it's an opportunity for you to share who you are, your background, your values, your personality, highlight your strengths. In terms of some tips I have for you guys all, like start early, start reflecting now. It's never too early to start thinking about the experiences that incited your interest in medicine in the first place. What about it continues to motivate you? It can be daunting to start your personal statement, but just get your ideas out on paper, literally like a rudimentary stream of consciousness, notes app type thing, like waiting for your food to like be done, or just random stuff. Just get your ideas out there on paper. Make it interesting, like make it a narrative, make it a story that tells your journey. How did you get to where you are right now? Try to have like a catchy intro. Don't try to take up too many of your word count and like character use. Don't use too much of your characters for the intro. Try not to make it cliche. Don't make it like over dramatic. But like it's totally, just try to make it a good read. And this is totally stylistic, but Alec and I love to do this, but in your intro, you mention like something, and then like at the conclusion or like the final paragraph, you kind of like circle back to that first point you did. Um, it creates like a full circle moment, and it's like really a pleasant read for those who are, reading your personal statement. Always be sure to like show, don't tell. Don't just rattle off your resume and your experiences. That's what your work and activity section is for your application. This is more so just like tell who you are, show some personality. You can definitely speak on impactful moments you've had during those experiences, like those activities that you've had, but don't be like, oh, I did this, 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 and this. Like, show, don't tell. Make sure you're answering the question, like why medicine? Sometimes you get lost in the sauce and you're so focused on the creativity, like, oh, does this flow well? And then you end up like not really fully clearly answering the question, why medicine? So just kind of keep that in mind. Have fun with it. Don't stress over it as much as I've noticed that like as soon as you stress about something, like the creativity just gets out of the door. So keep it low stakes. I don't know if I'm going to sound too jaded, but like at the end of the day, the people who are reading these essays read thousands, like hundreds, unless you're telling like the greatest story ever told, like this isn't going to make or break your application. So just like kind of like, it's like a low, like just as long, I don't know. Can you like speak on this? Like at
Yeah,
worst,
absolutely. So have you guys heard of the 10 80 10 rule? So it's 80% of personal statements won't make or break your application. It'll just be something that interviewers use to kind of guide the conversation with you. 10% will be incredible as far as being the reason why they invite you, and 10% will be absolutely awful. So just being within that 90% will be more than enough to either at best be a boon to your application and at worst be insignificant to it. So I think don't take it too seriously or just don't get too hung up on stressing yourself out over it.
yeah, for sure. And then always seek feedback. Try to get trusted people to take a look at it. They'll notice areas that you kind of are blind to. Um, and then I would also recommend like looking up some sample essays online. Even if it's a really like bad example, it's a good counter example of like what you don't want to do in your personal statement. Okay.
All right, so I'll be discussing the letter of recommendation. So how many of you guys have started asking for letters of recommendation? It's okay. Don't worry about it. To ask for letters of recommendation, you got to set up an Interfolio account, which is a service in which the writers will send the letters to. Each of these letters are sent from Interfolio to the application portals either individually or as a whole. So I think for AMCAS, it's sent entirely, and then you assign each letter on AMCAS itself. Whereas for ACOMAS, a GEO application portal, you have to send each a letter individually using the confidential letter upload function. So the requirements that you'd kind of want to look for are two science letters, so two letters from science instructors. This could be anyone. It doesn't necessarily have to be something that you think is medical related. I asked for one for my evolutionary and ecological biology professor and a physics professor. I don't know if they still teach limnology at UCI. There was this older professor that was our teacher, and it was the easiest A in the world, and he would always write a letter for us. So that just any two science letters are good. A non-science, so try to tap into the GE classes that you were taking and see if you ever harvested some sort of relationship there to see if they can write one for you. And one physician, so one that you had a close relationship with either through volunteering or shadowing would be effective. And as far as a physician letter, there's also conversation as far as whether you need a DO letter to apply for DO programs, and this isn't necessary either. I didn't apply with any DO letters, and it turned out fine. I think there's only one program, I think like in Arkansas, that requires a DO letter, but it's not something that will make or break your application either. Um, as far as additional letters you kind of want to look for, try to look for the experiences that were most meaningful to you and see if you can gather letters from your leaders in those regards. So a research letter, like at a PI to write you a letter, a volunteering letter. I don't know if you're volunteering at UCI Medical Center. So Sandra Serrano wrote both Chris and I a letter, she's the head of the volunteer department there, or any miscellaneous letter as well. So any other volunteer experience, any other community service experience. I've heard people asking pastors or priests for letters. So anything that will just showcase your character or showcase your effectiveness in being a physician. Try to look for professors that will write you a good letter. So those are professors or people that you know that will actually write a personal letter for you. And I know how hard it is. When I was applying, I struggled to find a second science professor, so I ended up asking a professor that I knew would say yes, but didn't necessarily know me that well. So we had to kind of interview each other for to write a more personalized letter for me. But try to harvest these relationships earlier in your college career or early in the year, just to establish that sort of personal rapport, so they can write you a strong letter. Ask early. Some of these professors have a limit as far as the number of letters they'll write. I know Kadandale has a letter. He's come up so many times more than often that I want in this presentation, but he'll have a limit to the number of times uh, he'll he'll write a letter for you for any student. So ask early as much as you can. And in some cases, you may need to write your own letter. I know for one of my residency application letters, I had to write my own. So I wrote my own letter. I sent it to my preceptor or my mentor, and they ended up submitting it themselves. And it's pretty common. These professors are very busy. They have a lot of things to do. But in any way, just try to you take it as an opportunity to write yourself a strong letter.
Yeah, it's like actually a good thing, honestly,
It's actually a
because
great
like
thing.
you know what the letter will be. Okay, selecting schools. For MD programs, there's something called MSAR. And basically it kind of tells you like the median admissions, like stats, like MCAT scores, GPA scores, things like that, GPAs. Um, and so when you're applying to schools, I would recommend like apply broadly, meaning like you have like a good chunk of the number of schools you're applying to are like targets. So like they have scores that kind of resemble your types of scores. And then 25% should be reach schools, like your dream schools. And then 25% should be like more safety schools. So schools that have stats that are like a little bit lower um, than what you got on your GPA, your MCAT and your GPA.
So there isn't necessarily an equivalent to MSAR for DO programs. ACOM has an official free program comparison tool called Choose DO Explorer, which shows the program's facilities, activities, support services, but doesn't have the average MCAT and GPA per program. It more so groups them as far as what their average is within a specific range. The best compilation of stats that I found is actually this third party. Um, a spreadsheet created by an SDN user called the Osteopathic School Guide. It scales the programs as far as the graduate outcomes, which I think should be your primary metric for program selection. And I found that it's been pretty reliable as far as my own assessment, but I still encourage you to do your due diligence on reviewing these programs individually.
Okay, for secondary applications, again, they come in as again a huge tidal wave. Here are some common prompts. And I think the biggest thing to do is, especially if you're taking a lot of gap years or one or two, rewrite these essays. You can use them across like different programs. You can kind of manipulate them for each of like the character limits that each of um, these portals have. But like there's always going to be like a diversity slash social advocacy type question. There's going to be like a hardship question. You can always like anticipate that these types of things will happen, will come up. Why us? So this is a kind of a tricky one to pre-write because it's like very specific to the specific, like to the program. It requires like a little bit of research, kind of scroll through the website, see any opportunities that kind of strike an interest in you. And then yeah, I won't read everything, but I think recently there's been one. I don't know if there still is, but there's always been like one COVID question about like how has COVID-19 affected your journey during like your pre-med years? And then Alec, do you want to talk about oh for DOs, there's always like a specific, I guess, some programs, Alec, is there do you want to talk on that
Yeah,
last point?
a lot of my secondaries included a question for why choosing a DO program specifically. So this is kind of just kind of feeding into the why us essentially. So try to lean into the philosophies or the branded philosophies as far as what differentiates the DO versus MD. So the the what I highlighted mostly was the emphasis on preventative medicine as opposed to just direct medicine. Though in practice, this isn't necessarily something that's true because MD programs teach as much preventative medicine as DO programs do, but it's just something that a lot of these programs do like as far as branding goes. And we included a
Hmm.
link here, this hyperlink to showcase the questions that programs asked in the past.
Hmm. And one final point, for those who do end up taking gap year, like you can anticipate like having an optional essay where you're kind of explaining what you did during that year. So just keep that in mind. Okay, good transition. So gap years. Keep busy. Like always have a plan. If you do plan to do a gap year, just try to like it's very tempting to kind of like take it easy. You worked so hard during your college years, but really try to have like opportunities lined up for you. Like for Alec and I, we had like medics and Armenia trip planned. We knew that we were going to study for the MCAT. We knew that while we were studying for the MCAT, we would be doing this like non-clinical or clinical shadowing or clinical volunteering. So do all that, but also take time for yourself to relax. I know it's like we're kind of like saying contradictory things, but just try to like do a lot of things. Like when you should also expect during interviews for interviewers to ask you, what did you do during your gap here? And it's perfectly fine to say like I went on a month-long trip to like Europe, that's fine. But you also want to be able to like speak on like these like good beefy experiences of like, oh, I also shadowed, I also did this, I also did that. Yeah, and I already talked about how we did things simultaneously, like study for the MCAT, like whenever you're in the thick of it, and then like volunteer at a food bank to kind of like break up your day a little bit.
All right. So let's get into the meat and potatoes here. So you didn't get into med school. What now? First of all, give yourself grace. Admissions are awful. It's a crap. It often feels really random. And if you think about it, all these programs get thousands and thousands of applications, and sometimes you just don't get in. I didn't get in my first time. Uh, and after you give yourself grace, try to take a breather, give yourself a little bit of break, start to reflect on your application and what you can improve. Was it your scores that weren't necessarily as high as you wanted them to be? Did you not necessarily apply as broadly as you should have? Did you only apply to MD programs? This was my fatal flaw in my first application cycle. I didn't necessarily apply to any DO programs in my first cycle. Are there any experience gaps? Did you meet all those six experiences that I was mentioning earlier that are on ACOMAS? Is there anything else that you can add to make yourself a little bit more of a well-balanced applicant? And after you get that reflection through, you got to re-strategize. So if your scores are an issue, consider taking your MCAT, but approach this with incredible caution. Only take it if you are certain you can score higher. Chris was mentioning the story of the friend that we had that ended up scoring more poorly on their second application, and they ended up having a pretty poor outcome. They ended up getting into medical school, but still, it wasn't necessarily ideal. So only take it if you're certain. Broaden the programs you apply to. Include DO programs. I can't stress this enough. If you didn't apply to DO programs in the first time, I would really recommend doing so. But if you didn't, try to broaden your approach to your application, and also be prepared to explain to programs why your previous application cycle wasn't successful or what you necessarily changed since your last application cycle. This was I was in an interesting position here because my first application cycle was in 2019 and my second application cycle was in 2020. So there wasn't necessarily any opportunity for me to make any improvements on my application cycle due to the pandemic. But the expectation is there to make improvements on your application as you go from cycle to cycle. But the biggest thing you can do here is to try to do whatever you can to prevent reapplication. So, like I was mentioning, apply realistically, check your stats. Are your safety schools really within your safety range? In my opinion, I would only count a school to be a safety school if you're above the 75th percentile of matriculants as far as scores go. GPAs are a lot broader, but the MCAT score is a lot more of a standardized metric that programs use. Also spend time assessing the in-state versus out-of-state preferences. A lot of programs statistically are a good fit for you as far as being within your MCAT and GPA range, but only accept 3% out-of-state applicants. So California applicants are SOL in that regard. So don't necessarily consider these target or safety schools. Apply broadly. There are a lot of incredible programs that are in less than ideal areas that you necessarily wouldn't have considered living in before. So just bear that in mind when selecting your application, selecting your programs. And this is something that I stress to anyone applying to medical schools. Apply to both MD and DO programs on your first cycle. Like I was mentioning earlier, the barrier to a lot of DO programs is a little lower. So I highly encourage you to apply to a handful of DO programs that have good match rates and graduation outcomes. But at the end of the day, sometimes it's unpreventable. It feels like a crapshoot. And if you think about it, like I was saying, they review thousands of applications, many of which are high achieving individuals like everyone on this call. So, uh, all I'm many of you have already ticked all these boxes on their application and experiences. So when it comes down to it, it comes down to luck that your application came across the desk of an admissions officer that thinks that your story resonated with them in some sort of reason. So just give yourself some grace, be kind to yourself, and just do whatever you can to improve anything within your own control. All right, so this is something else I'll be covering myself. So we have the curriculum and clerkship differences here between the programs. The major difference here between the MD and DO programs is the addition of osteopathic manipulative therapy into the curriculum of first and second year. So this is in addition to the core basic and clinical sciences courses that we're all expected to take. And this is an additional 200 hours of training in musculoskeletal diseases and treatment using physical methods. Otherwise, training is almost entirely identical, typically 2 years of didactic education in the classroom, followed by 2 years of hands-on clinical education out in the field. There is a school of thought, like I was mentioning, that there's a different philosophy as far as integrating lifestyle and environmental factors into the practice of medicine as a DO physician, or that there's an increased focus on disease prevention as opposed to treatment itself. But in practice, these are principles that are taught in nearly every medical school program across the country, both DO and MD. So the principles that are necessary, uh, or that aren't necessarily a difference as far as your education goes. So, how many of you guys are familiar with STEM and Comlex? All right, I only bring this up because I had very little knowledge of knowing or of any of these exams before starting medical school. So I think it'd be good to bring up. These will be our first set of board exams. The exams that MDs take for graduation is the USMLE STEP exams, while the exam that DOs take are the Comlex exams. Both exams are equivalent in nature and difficulty, but Comlex also tests on OMT, which is the additional courses taken in didactics. Um, but this is in addition to everything else that you would also be expected to know for the STEP exams. However, many DO students, myself included, also elected to take the USMLE STEP exams. And this is something that you would do if you're considering applying to more competitive specialties or programs. So STEP and Complex 1 are the basic science exams that you take after your second year, after you finish didactics. And Complex 2 and STEP 2 are the clinical knowledge exams that you take after your first year of clinical clerkships. So looking at the notable difference here. So most DO programs compared to MD programs are private. And while medical school is very expensive, regardless of whether you go MD or DO, because most DO programs are private, very few offer differential tuition for in-state versus out-of-state matriculants. DO programs tend not to be attached to large research institutions like most large MD programs. However, this isn't an absolute. I know there are some programs in Michigan, like Michigan State University, that has a DO program, and that's attached to a large research institution in that regard. Despite this, a lot of programs have established research programs in-house that may help you connect with local opportunities, even if they're not directly through the school. Furthermore, I'm a big proponent of self-guided scholarly activity. Every poster counts, every manuscript counts, and every well thought out case report counts. I ended up collaborating myself with a lot of the residents I worked with on rotations and a lot of the doctors I worked with. So I've been on the conference circuit all year, and I've been presenting at national and state conferences all year just through that independent route. So there are definitely ways to achieve this scholarly activity without the association with a laboratory in medical school. And this is a big one. Some DO programs, only very few, have difficulty assigning core rotations, especially the newer and less established programs. I've linked the 2023 Osteopathic School Guide here again, which includes the information with regard to the local rotations and teaching hospitals for each program. But this more so drives home the point that you need to do your due diligence on all programs, both DO and MD, to take a look at the curriculum, take a look at the resources, and see whether they meet your goals and your preferences. Another consideration to make is the specialty trains between MDs and DOs. DOs and MDs can pursue any specialty in medicine, but DOs tend to match into more primary care specialties like IM, PEDS, and FM, or family medicine and emergency medicine. DOs have matched into very high ranking specialties like dermatology, general surgery, orthosurgery, ENT. Any specialty, truly. But these specialties are hard to match in for anyone, either MD or DO. But match rates have historically been lower for DOs and MDs in some of these more specialized residencies. But for any program, I'd recommend checking out a program's published match list to see how broadly their classes matched into these competitive specialties. I ended up choosing Tor Nevada over the other programs that I applied to because of this specialty match. So, like I noted, the MD and DO match rates for these competitive specialties has been shrinking over the last several years. A point that I want to drive home is to consider your goals. If you're dead set on pursuing plastic surgery or neurosurgery, it may be worth your time to solely apply for an MD program. But I think there's a bit of a curse as far as going to medical school with horse blinders and kind of going in with only one goal. I really think it's to your benefit to keep an open mind going into medical school because you're not gonna have nearly as much clinical experience prior to medical school as you would after medical or through medical school. So just keep an open mind. Try to look at every clinical opportunity you gain over this structured period of your training to really gather what you can as far as your interests go. Something I really want to mention here is how the international medical graduates or the IMGs fare in the match. They're the orange bar here. And I know how tempting the IMG route could be with the ease of admission, like the ones at Ross, St. George, or even some of the Irish schools. Trust me, I was there, especially after my first application cycle, but I can't stress how highly I recommend against it. There are a bunch of issues with these programs, whether it be the insane cost, the difficulty securing rotations, or the attrition rate with these programs, which means the number of students that end up dropping out pretty early, which tends to be pretty high for these programs. But I think the match rates alone should guide you away from this option. Doing well in these programs isn't impossible. Some of the best doctors that I've worked with have come from these programs themselves. But matching as an IMG is an uphill battle, and you don't want to go through 4 years of medical school, putting yourself through hundreds of thousands of dollars of debt, some of the hardest training that you'll be going through thus far, simply to not match. So approach this caution, or sorry, approach this option with extreme caution and hesitancy. So if there's any slide that I want you to remember from this presentation to be this slide, the MD and DO match rate is essentially identical. The MD match rate was last 93% and the DO match rate was 92.3%, which has increased by 4% over the last 4 years. Meanwhile, the US IMG rate was 67%, a decrease of 0.6% from last year. And the non-US IMG is even lower than that. And I provided the links here for the charting outcomes that the National Registry of Matching Programs publishes. They just published one this year. So they have one for MDs, DOs, and IMGs.
Okay, I know we're running a little short on time, but I just wanted to like quickly create one slide that just lists with links like different opportunities I would highly recommend. It's definitely geared more towards UCI students, but like biosite peer tutoring application is right here. Europe, Scribe for America, obviously not a must, but if you were planning to take a gap year, I would definitely consider maybe scribing for a year or so. The Irvine Clinical Experience Program to get some good shadowing experience, UCI Medical Center volunteering. And then there's something called Plexus, and I'm actually the editor-in-chief of it, but it's basically UC Irvine School of Medicine's Medical Humanities Journal. And we accept submissions from anyone from the UCI community from like November to January. And the reason why I recommend you all to submit art pieces, poems, anything is because it's considered a academic publication. It's like the easiest way to get like a publication listed on your application. I'll talk about it in the next slides, but do you want to talk about these ones, Alec?
Yeah, sure. So Second Harvest Food Bank was the one that we talked about earlier. It's a distribution center at the OC Great Park. You can pack produce to be sent out to local organizations. They also have opportunities that are where you go and actually harvest the produce out in local farms, which is actually a lot of fun. We picked out some green beans last time we went, which is a lot. It's a fun way to spend a Saturday morning. Take some friends with you, just have a good time. And these last two organizations are programs that I love working with even now. For goodness cakes. Uh, with this organization, you volunteer to bake birthday cakes for people with underprivileged backgrounds or at-risk kids who are experiencing uh, homelessness or in the foster system. And Icing Smiles is an organization where you bake cakes for children experiencing critical illness. So if you have a penchant for baking or making cakes, these are two organizations that are good to include on your application. I believe for each cake that you make for Goodness Cakes, it ends up being about 3 hours that you can add to your volunteer repertoire.
Okay, so this is Plexus. I have the link over here, but I think the thing I wanted to drive home was that like, yeah, it's just like a quick little easy way to get a publication on your resume. Literally doesn't have to be anything, just like a photo of like the beach or something, but try to relate it to the theme. We don't have the theme set for next year's issue, but um, just to ensure that your piece does get published, try to relate it to the theme in like the little description box.
All right. So one of my hobbies is baking. So I wanted to highlight this page for a couple of reasons. Like Chris was mentioning, it's a good way to make your interest work for you. So you may like to paint, you may like to draw or bake in your free time, but what's a broader application of this interest? So sharing your creations, or whether it's visually or physically, I think is a good way to do it. Do you donate your baked goods? Do you make cakes for local nonprofits like through For Goodness Cakes or Icing Smiles? Did you start a freelance business? Do you share your paintings or structures or whatever on Pinterest or whatever? So these are good ways that you can showcase transcending your hobbies in a way that makes it more fascinating. And if your hobbies are visual, I'd recommend making a public Instagram account like I did here. Establishes a bit of legitimacy for what you do for fun. It gives you an additional platform to discuss your interests as well. I actually ended up linking this Instagram page on my hobby section for my residency application, and I've already been asked about it on interviews. So it's definitely worth your while. Yeah, just to walk you through the cakes here. On the right, this is a cake I made for a patient that had a liver transplant, a 7-year-old kid. The one on the left here is one that I donated through For Goodness Cakes, and the one in the middle is just one I made for fun, actually. Didn't go to anyone.
Okay. I know we're kind of like already like over time, but these are the questions that were pre-submitted. We kind of addressed most of them, but just to kind of fly through them for the first, we can alternate them, okay?
Yeah, sure.
I'll do, okay. For the first one, like gap years are so common. If anything, nowadays it's pretty rare to have no gap years. As long as you're being productive and you're making your gap years like worthwhile, it's never seen as a red flag by schools. I took 2 gap years, Al took 3. It's like not the end of the world. I know it's really scary, like telling your Armenian parents that, you're just gonna be floating around for a little while, but like you're studying for the MCAT, you're still keeping busy, you're building your resume to ensure that you have a very successful application cycle.
Something I wanted to mention here actually was trying to pursue interests during this gap year, other interests besides medicine, because one, it adds to your how diverse your application is, and two, the path to medicine is very, very, very challenging to a degree that some people consider whether they've chosen the right career path after not necessarily making that much of a time between going to medical school and ending undergraduate. Actually, one of my close friends ended up taking a leave of absence from medical school because they came to the realization that they didn't explore another passion they had, which was teaching. So they ended up substitute teaching for a bit before coming back to medical school. So definitely take advantage of this time if you end up choosing a gap year.
Okay,
And
for
as
number
far as
two, oh,
the,
sorry.
should I
Yeah,
take
go
this
for it,
one?
Alec. Yeah, go for it.
Okay, so yeah, as far as memorable experiences, for me, it was a lot of the clinical experiences that I had, whether it was the ICE program, which allowed us to shadow a lot of doctors at once. I got asked about medics in Armenia a lot, whether it be just any opportunity you have to uh, provide care in any difficult situation or a difficult setting. That was really, really impressive. Also, my minor in medical anthropology book got brought up a lot, and how a lot of medicine now is shifting towards a broader approach and addressing social determinants of care. So showcasing your commitment to learning that would be great.
Okay, for number three, any interview tips? So how Alec and I do is like we literally just open a document and list every single possible question or gotcha question you can think of. Like be like brutal on yourself, like why would we pick you? Or like what makes you think you're better than like just try to be like rude to yourself and then like in the safety of your own space, kind of like quietly just like draft a little response for yourself. And then you're basically creating a script. I'm not saying memorize it, but just putting your thoughts out there and kind of reviewing this script before the interview kind of will guide how you respond in person. You definitely don't want to sound rehearsed. but I think it makes it a lot less scary if you're already expecting the big scary questions.
Yeah,
Um,
totally. Also, know your application. I know it sounds silly, but your interviewers will be asking questions about your experiences, and you need to be prepared to expand on these experiences and what they mean to you. So just be sure you know exactly what you're presenting to these programs and how you can expand on that in person or virtually. Also, to answer the question as far as whether they are in person or remote, all of mine were remote because it was at the height of the pandemic. I believe the standard practice now is for all of them to be virtual as well, but there may be some that are in person. So for these last, why MD school over PA versus nursing, and why medical school is right for you, we'll combine these two questions. So, you want to go first, Chris?
yeah, so I think like my decision to pursue medicine in general was like pretty organic. Like I never went into like I never entered my college years thinking I would pursue medicine at all. It just was like a series of events that like further confirmed that I was on the right path. I've always been one that like took great pride in being of service to others and not to get all like deep or introspective, but I feel like it's like how I was raised, like as like an Armenian, like we go over and beyond to ensure that other people are comfortable and like extreme hospitality. So I feel like that was a huge like motivating force. And that plus like my gravitation towards like STEMmy things. Like I was always like a science person, not so much like an artsy. I mean, I do like the arts, but it was never like academically arts for me. I don't know. In terms of like PA and nursing, I don't know. I mean, I never really
I could
taken
take
on
that
it.
one. Yeah, so I chose medicine for the same reasons that Chris said. As far as choosing being a physician over a nurse or PA, all these options are excellent in the field far as fields to pursue, and all have their benefits. And I encourage you to consider all your options. That being said, I'd be lying if I said I put much consideration to other options because being a doctor was always my end goal. Doctors, in my opinion, play a little bit more of like a cerebral role, if that makes sense, in the healthcare process. So much of a doctor's job is thinking and knowing and making decisions, often incredible amount of education and training that frankly isn't necessarily seen in other healthcare professions. And think of what it means to have a doctorate degree. So it's the highest degree that you can gain in any field. Think of your professors now and how most, if not all of them, have their own doctorate in their own respective fields, and have established themselves as experts in what they study and practice. And the same expectation is there for physicians. You are earning your education to be an expert in medicine. So, in addition to being an excellent practitioner of medicine, having that baseline of knowledge and expertise in medicine is something that's always been interesting to me. That being said, all these other fields are incredible options and play such an integral role in medicine, and all have their benefits and drawbacks as well. So I encourage you to take a look at all these options. But that's just my perspective as far as why I chose being a doctor.
Mhm. So that kind of answers number five as well. For number six, like, do you think therapy and psychiatry? Yeah, I mean, I think psychiatry is such a booming field nowadays. Many med students are actually seeking more of these like lifestyle specialties, meaning specialties that have great work hours, they're flexible work hours, work settings, low stress, it's lucrative, you're making a decent amount of money. Um, what the job market looks like is like nowadays, I'm not exactly sure. I can't really speak on it, especially like in more desirable areas like Southern California. It seems to be saturated with every single specialty of that pretty much. But I think just like the general destigmatization of like mental health issues nowadays has like ensured that psychiatry has a really strong future moving forward.
Yeah, totally. And I feel like psychiatry, as far as the medical aspect of it, is indispensable as far as how psychiatry or how the mental health field is treated. No other field in the mental health world can prescribe medication. And while therapy is such an important tool, a lot of the times it's the first line treatment for a lot of these mental health issues. Medication is still an incredibly important part of psychiatric help. So it's always going to be on demand.
Okay, what did you think about the curriculum? So like as a first gen med student, I knew med school would be hard, but I never fully appreciated it until I was like 1 month into my first year of med school and realized in that first month, it pretty much covered all 4 years of my undergraduate studies, like in 1 month. Like it's insane and almost inhumane, the pace and the speed at which they expect you to memorize and learn. Um, But I want to emphasize that like we are all really strong. If Alec and I could do it, literally anyone can. We're not that
We're not extraordinary. Like everyone is
yeah.
capable of doing this.
And in terms of like how UCI's curriculum is laid out, like in year one, we learn about what the healthy body, like what a healthy body looks like organ systems. We had it in like certain like organ system blocks. Like we had a pulmonary block, renal block, cardiology, neuro. And then during year two, it was more so like the diseased body. So how these systems go wrong, how we treat them with drugs, management, diagnostic tests, etc. And then years three and four is where you're actually doing these rotations. You're actually out in the hospital, you're taking care of real patients, you're carrying maybe like two to three patients per day. You're kind of evaluating, you're creating a plan, you're seeing the patient, you're listening to their hearts, things like that, auscultating their heart and lung sounds. But then you present it to the attending and they say, yeah, that was actually really great, or no, that was a trash plan, let's do this instead, which it's all part of the learning process.
Yeah. So as far as my curriculum goes, it is identical to Chris's. It is the structure was entirely the same as far as first year being the healthy body and like or more so just looking at the systems themselves and how they work and how it works in a healthy body. Second year was more so looking at the pathologies and looking primarily at the disease state of these bodies. And the same thing as far as Chris goes with the our third and fourth years focusing on your clinical clerkships. The core clinical clerkships were identical to UCI's, and each core rotation was followed by a shelf exam. And even though we're a DO school, most of our shelf exams were actually MBME clinical science subject exams, which is the same clinical or examination body that administers the STEP exams. So, taking these exams over the course of third year prepared us pretty significantly for step two, in addition to complex two, if you choose to take both exams. Fourth year, we're in our uh, electives and sub-Is or the internships, which is where you go to these programs and you essentially audition essentially for these residency programs. In addition to that, fourth year is primarily just absent interviews. So there is some variation as far as clinical education and curriculum goes from school to school. There are some schools that only have 1 year of preclinical education and they really just condense everything really quickly. Uh, some people prefer that, some people don't, but it really just depends on where you go.
Okay. This last one we kind of already talked about, right, Alec? I
Yeah,
would
so
maybe
I
like,
don't
do you want to
really.
open it up to the floor maybe for any like live questions?
Oh, yeah, sure. Yeah, totally.
So yeah, just either drop a question in the chat or feel free to unmute yourself and ask a question. Um, but that's pretty much it. Here are our emails. Feel free to reach out to us if you want us to. If you have any questions or anything like life advice, anything, we're here to help you guys.
No,
Um,
we know how overwhelming it could be, and I understand that a lot of even this slide set could be a little overwhelming. But again, Chris and I can't really stress enough how truly anyone can do it. It's not like we're not necessarily special for doing this. Don't necessarily try to think that you need an ego to be able to do this or need to be an extraordinary human being to achieve this kind of stuff. You absolutely can and you will. Just it may take time. Just try to be on your own track. Don't necessarily compare yourself against your other peers. Just try to follow your own track and keep your eyes on the prize.
Yeah, everyone's on their own timeline. It's totally fine if you don't have any of this done and you're like in your fourth year and you're kind of like really stressing out right now. It's totally fine. You have your gap years to fill in the gaps. Take stock of what you have. Knowledge is power. So we kind of laid out everything that would make you a strong applicant. So just see what you have and what you don't have and just work towards filling in those gaps. Yeah, the cakes are awesome, Lori.
Yeah, thank you.
Alec
Thank you
is
so much.
like